Now, Ken, you have had a lot of. First of all, I want to get your thoughts and your experiences around what's going on in the States, but also what's going on in our own country around Black Lives Matter and the racism and everything that's going on after George Floyd's death. But then also to maybe we'll talk a bit more. But first, what's your impressions about what's happening?
Dave and crew, I've been really glued to it. Simply because I think there's a few things that are going on. I've spent a lot of time in the U.S. I've traveled extensively with the Heebie-Jeebies, my band, and I work for the YMCA professionally, and have done tons and tons of work in different parts of the states. At one point, there was a map that was shown where all of the various big protests were sort of manifesting themselves in the last week. And I think there was, 20 places on the map, and I'd been to 17 of them.
Wow.
And I can tell you that this feels like a really important moment, not
Mm-hmm.
just for that country, but for the world. In the same way that there have been other important moments recently, things like the Me Too movement and others that have manifested themselves and sort of, they don't. This one doesn't feel like it's going to blow over.
Mm-hmm.
This one feels like a systematic and an important change. But I think one of the complications of that is finding our place, our individual place, or places, even as Canadians, in the conversation. I'm not a black man. Nobody on this call is a black man or a black person, but I don't think that means that we don't have a role. And
Mm-hmm.
that role is not to have all the answers. That role is probably more about having the questions. This is the moment I think that it's important to listen. And I think that is somebody said, it was in the flotsam and jetsam of the social media world in the last few days, but somebody posted something that really resonated with me. They said, maybe you can't figure out this challenge. Maybe anything you do in the next day, month, year, lifetime won't help George Floyd. But little acts of service and little kindnesses can actually make a huge difference. And maybe that difference is just in the circle around you. And it was really interesting, the conversation that I've been sort of having with my friends on social media, on Facebook and other places, it's around two things. I think it's around powerlessness and powerfulness, and who's got the power to fix this thing, or who doesn't feel like they have the power to fix this thing. But mostly it's about fear. People
Mm.
are afraid for their fellow neighbor, or they're sharing stories of what they've seen or heard or has happened to them, or it's about the fear of not knowing what to do.
Mm.
I want to help. I want to be a part of this. And there's a very wise, very wise woman named Jessica Bolduc. She is an Indigenous woman and a leader of part of something called the 4Rs movement. You can Google it, 4Rs, and it's around connecting Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, youth, and looking for a brighter future. And she said something that was really powerful. And I don't know if this is her work, but it's where I heard it, through the Calgary Foundation. She talks about the whole notion of edge walking. We're on the edge of a cliff, and what's down below us looks very scary and catastrophic, and that kind of feels like where we are in the moment right now in history. But we can stay away from that cliff, or we can try to walk the edge.
Mm.
And sure, some stones will slip, and we'll feel uncomfortable, and we'll feel sad, and we'll feel lonely, and we'll feel vulnerable. But it's better to walk the edge and maybe make a few mistakes than it is to go, nope, that's not a problem. And, oh, I've got a black friend, I'm good. Or, all lives matter. These are the opportunity right now is to walk that edge. And I think that is the case when it comes to black or indigenous or people of color or anything that might be gripping us right now. And I got to say, what's happening south of the border is affecting every aspect of our lives, whether it's economic or social or political. And it's certainly affecting my psyche and maybe many others. But this is a chance to walk the edge bravely and do it together.
Mm.
Well said. Well said.
Well said. What do you think? I remember having a discussion with an activist in the gay rights and LGBTQ movement, and they said the biggest challenge, because I said, what do I need to learn? What do I need to know? And his point was, you need to be willing to be wrong. And not only do you need to be willing to wrong, you have to the whole world has to say it's okay if you're wrong, and now let's make it right. As opposed to I didn't do anything wrong, it wasn't me, I didn't do anything wrong. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I did. What's your sense of that in this movement?
Yeah, that's a really great question. My wife and I, we were chatting about this yesterday. Tara, who is my better half, she's Caucasian, and she said to me yesterday when we were chatting about this, she said, when previously in her life, when you're a young teen or a mid early 20s, you have that, at least for her, she had that moment where she thought, well, these are historical injustices. This, I wasn't involved in colonization 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It's not on me. But then, what she said was, as she matured and she sort of thought about it, and she realizes now that I think we all have a shared responsibility in here. Sure, we can't change what happened in the past, but the action you take tomorrow, when you're walking down the street and you see somebody who is of the other, who maybe doesn't look like you or doesn't talk like you have an opportunity. Um, and I think that is changing. I think that is changing. And here's why I say that. So my son is 15 years old. He's in the room right behind me playing Minecraft, right through that door. That's my office. I never get to use it because he's playing Minecraft, and that's okay. But he's 15 years old, and he'll probably get mad at me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. He's on Instagram, like every other 15-year-old in the world. But my son uses Instagram as a direct messaging tool. He talks to his buds, and they have great, interesting conversations about hockey and all the other stuff they talk about. But he never posts. He never posts on Instagram. But I noticed yesterday. I went on Instagram to see what else people were posting, and there was lots of black squares. That would make sense in Blackout Tuesday. And then I saw a post from my son, the first post he's ever posted, and it was a black square. It was around blackout. Sorry. So I guess what I'm saying is he's figuring it out. And if he can figure it out at 15, God knows the ones of us that are 15 and a half, we can be a little vulnerable and learn about this stuff too. And it's that edge walking piece. It's making a start. So there's hope.
Good for him.
I was about to, my final question was going to be what gives you hope, and that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I think there's one more thing that gives me hope, and that is just having honest conversations. I had emails and texts and Facebook posts yesterday from a whole walk of everybody that's had lived experience in this, to the blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid who felt guilty about not having a direct experience. But I had an interesting message that was sent to me by a friend. And this friend is very smart and, very erudite and a really cool guy. But he said, how dare all these white folks talk about racism on your channel? And I said simply, what would be the alternative to that? What would be the alternative? For them to just shut up about and go, I have no place in this? That doesn't accomplish actually very much. So I would rather people, whatever their lived experience is, to bring their best selves to the conversation, and then to just go, this is not about me, or I don't have a role in this, because that's not how we move society forward. And I think that's important. So be brave and have conversations.
What that's so good. What grade is your son in?
He's in grade 9.
Isn't that amazing how that's we've been talking about grads showing off your very sassy grad pictures, but part of that is that's that era, and we all remember that time when the world is open, and that youthful, I don't actually know what I want to do, but I just want to do a lot, is we kind of need that in these times. It's young people that are going to make this sort of shift happen, I think.
Yeah. Acts of service matter. That's where we start to learn them. That's why I started to learn them. I started to learn them at the YMCA. Plug, I'm the marketing guy there, but that's where I started to learn them. And it's heartening to see kids our kids' age that are starting to get these messages, probably earlier than we did. I don't think I was woke until well into my second degree, but they're starting early, and good on them.
Wow. It's so good. It's so good. And so what do we do today? In your world, what's walking the edge look like for you on Wednesday, for those of us participating and wanting to do something today? Ken, what's your sense?
You know what? For me, it is finding allies that want to walk too. Because it's pretty lonely to try to make change yourself. I have a friend who works in the nonprofit sector, as I do, and yesterday she sent a beautiful email to a bunch of us, and she just said, "Can I?" She basically said, "We need to make a start, whatever that looks like." So we're having a Zoom call next week to figure out what that means. I don't know what that means. Maybe we'll have a potluck and we'll just invite a bunch of people into our virtual living rooms and we'll just have a chat about it and start to see if there's some actions we can take. I know that my friend John Cornish, amazing CFL player
Yeah.
and Stampeder, he had an incident with racism, he and his wife, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Well, I reached out to John and I sent him a note saying, "Hey, dude, how you doing?" Maybe that's all it needs to be to start. So for me, it's just thinking about what that looked like. Yesterday, I went for a walk in my neighborhood, and there was a new neighbor. I'd never seen the guy before, and he was digging in his lawn. He was doing all the things that a neighbor does in his lawn. And guess what? He was black, and I said hi, and now I've got a new friend. And that's not rocket science, but it's something I did, and I think that's important.
That's wild.
Good on John. He started the Black Chambers of Commerce,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
so
a
important.
mentoring group. It's around connecting youth to stories of success that are so very important. And I mean, maybe he's got $1 million in infrastructure to do that, but I doubt it. He just did it.
Isn't that great? Well, and you know what, Julie, poor Julie, she's on she's working in this kitchen of hers that has terrible Wi-Fi, and she's like, I'm sorry, I'm not mad at you. It's not like anyone said anything. It's just the way it is. So she slipped off. Ken, I feel like I feel charged to say I don't know what I'm going to do today that's different than yesterday, but I hope it's a little bit different than yesterday and a little bit different than the week before. And I do feel the same as you. I do feel this is a big thing. This is not another just a news story that next week we'll be talking about something else. I think it's a big deal. So I really appreciate you coming by and chatting.
I think
We've got an opportunity.
I kind of feel like it's our responsibility as fellow humans to not let the conversation stop.
Yeah, agree.
Right? We're all responsible to make sure.
Be kind. Look for acts of service. That matters.
Yeah.
And if you can, go to the Y, because Ken's the marketing guy there, and we want to support his job.
Thanks. We're not quite open yet, but we're working on it, darn it.